So you have ornament and automata, which is theoretically would be the most difficult thing to combine. And it's not just through Hephaestus. I mean, it's clear that we don't use Greek mythology as a way of telling stories, but they're real. Well, they're figures. That means they're conceptually extremely strong. So it's no accident he has club feet. It's no accident he has a bad marriage. It's no accident he's actually married to Aglaia. It's no accident of what he's actually creating. What he's creating are daedala, these very intriguing, intricate objects, and these split in two. They split in the direction of ornament and in the direction of automata, which are, as you've already seen, two main branches of the Myra board. One like in the moving in the direction of radiance, close to the idea of ornament. But you can also see that radiant figure, especially the last event, during the last event, was actually transforming into a figure of movement, right? The Nataraja had both a halo and a dancing posture, and you saw that dancing posture actually created multiple limbs. So you could constantly see the switch of radiance and self-movement. So that's embodied. I wouldn't normally use that term, but it's embodied by that figure of Hephaestus. And that's the reason why I split that figure in two, or that lecture into ornament. So what's ornament? I've already made clear in the standing lectures and other lectures that I don't agree with this opposition of ergon and parergon. It is correct in the sense that parergon comes after ergon. If you take the view from let's say structure first and then add ornament, that's not always the case. You can just look at like different types of ornament, not just Indian ornament, but also Moroccan or North African in general, but also William Morris, that we've studied extensively when we looked at John Ruskin's work, is that you get this sort of the weak figures intertwining with each other and then creating structure, right? So that reversal of let's say movement and object, or that reversal of weakness and stance, we already had much earlier. But here we're like following the traditional route, starting with Alberti and Winkelmann. There we have structure first, and then make it lively, add acanthus leaves, add entasis, add molding, add the weakened fructus and hang them from them. So pendants, bracelets, earrings, all those figures sort of start to like take their positions as hanging figures. And then it slowly reverses because these are moving figures. It's clear that earrings and bracelets, you can see that in the discussion of Georg Simmel when he talks about adornment. Very beautiful discussion. Where he starts to look at the figure actually using jewelry and adornment, and that starts to become a radiating figure. So he's not looking like, let's say, okay, there's the person first and then we hang earrings from them, or we add bracelets and pendants. No, he's actually looking at how it moves and how it actually moves with that radiance of jewelry. And so you already start to see there that if you look at it from a conceptual level or a figural level, it starts to become a radiating figure. So that the idea of movement being sort of understood as part of ornament, we saw with A.B. Warburg, bewegtes Beiwerk comes from Alberti. It's actually a very interesting term. Of course, a Beiwerk is the German for parergon. And that's the way how we move towards Hephaestus. Hephaestus can hardly be conceived as somebody using the idea of parergon, because he never stops embellishing. It's just a constant overflowing of ornament. There's gold, silver, intricacy. Everything is embellished. And when the descriptions are there in Homer and Pindar and Hesiod, in any battle, you hardly ever follow the battle. You just see like the flickering of the sword, and you see the gleaming of the helmet and the greaves, and it's always described as pure appearance. right? There's hardly any action. There's more glitter and gleaming, which is typical for of course we know from that from the Greeks. So there's this reversal of ornament becoming a movement and then a radiance of figures. And you can turn around the argument as well when you go to automata in the descriptions of Hephaestus. Now, of course, these club feet are extremely important. It's not just like, okay, he's the only sweating god and he's the only one that's disabled. He actually needs the prosthesis, and the prostheses he uses are actually two golden female robots. Don't forget, automata is something else than just a machine. It's a machine with a face. It's a machine with a that is figural and actually self-moves. Right, it's not one that is fed by any energy from the outside. It's actually self-moving. So we get this idea of the automaton as something that is hardly with a mechanism. We see later when they use the word automata, which means marvel or wonder, to describe automatons. In the 2nd century BC with Hero of Alexandria, which they start to talk about the hidden mechanism and the pulleys and the threads and everything, sort of the mechanics of these apparatuses. But in the time of Hephaestus, it's not that at all. It doesn't discuss the mechanism, the hidden mechanism. It discusses the gleaming. So what's important is that it's made of gold. It's actually the gold that makes these objects work. It's quite stunning to see in the description, for instance, of the tripods, that it actually says that they self-move because of the golden wheels, right? So the idea of shining and movement are directly related. So it's both, and goes in both ways. So one is the ornament way, goes in the direction of self-movement, and the self-movers are described in the direction of gleaming. I think I'm going to stop now. I'm going to introduce Marisabel. Marisabel will speak about a specific take on the work of Simondon. I'm not sure if you guys are aware or familiar with the work of Gilbert Simondon, a philosopher of technology, though I don't think he would agree with that term, but a philosopher of techniques maybe. From the 1950s, especially in the 1960s. So that's sort of this background, this whole world, of course, Heidegger in Germany, and then phenomenology in France, a few philosophers of technology in the same period, André Laurent Gourand, for instance, from the viewpoint of anthropology, spoke about the curtain of technical objects, the curtain of objects. Simondon, extensive work going in many directions. So it's always very, very difficult to find your way through it, also because there's so much written about him already. Not in the field of architecture, though. And I think that's what makes Marisabel's take so interesting. Marisabel studied at Princeton, BA and MArch from Princeton, then 2 years of Eisenman. I always wonder how you survived that, Marisabel. 2 years of Eisenman must be enough. And then you fled to France, or was it New York first? You were in France for 8 years, I think. And a long career in architecture and scenography. And then you slowly changed your mind and decided to pursue a PhD at Georgia Tech. That's a while ago. So working your way through Simondon, which is an incredible journey for everybody. It was very, very difficult. Also because at that time it wasn't translated. You do a lot of work in Georgia Tech, Divergence, obviously, lecturer, teaching studios. So there's a lot of work and yeah, a PhD to be finished. And this really specifically concentrates on the idea of techno-aesthetics. And that's sort of an undercurrent in Simondon, because everybody speaks about milieu, metastability, all these sort of individuation processes, but that idea of appearing, how technological objects appear, and appearing in this case is not just light falling on a hammer, right? It's not just light on a hammer, it's how the hammer itself appears. or technical objects in general. So that's quite a construct she has to figure out, and that's what she's going to talk about now. The floor is yours, Marisabel.
Okay, thank you, Lars. I will now share my screen. Hopefully everybody can see.
Yeah.
So I will return to, excuse me, I will return in this discussion of Simondon to the figure of the transducer as it manifests in the person of the French philosopher of technology, Gilbert Simondon. As you recall, the transducer, as I mentioned earlier, with transduction, Simondon introduces an operation that allows both the ontogenesis of knowledge and that of being. As an activity, it propagates by successive phases in physical, biological, mental, and social domains. And as it propagates, it structures itself and transforms itself and its structuration. So transduction is also discussed as technicity and described as a transitory and partial reality that is both result and principle. It involves relations of becoming and not being. Relations cannot be defined by a priori terms, but by affinities that crystallize from particular conditions of existence. So transduction contrasts with the logical operations of deduction and induction, both which stand apart from the terms they seek to relate. So on the one hand, deduction seeks external structural models to import, and on the other hand, induction parses and generalizes to the point of ignoring the particular. It's possible to think transformation within the structure of these systems of logic, according to Simondon. So the emergent functioning of transduction not only allows one to think transformation, but the transformational nature of the thinking means knowledge and being become manifest in material relation. In 1982, Simondon writes to Jacques Derrida, supporting his project of revitalizing philosophy. Yet he questions the omission of religious or aesthetic thought from the project. Why, he asks. This question will hang in suspension as it will be 7 years before the letter will reach its recipient. On Techno-Aesthetics, later published as On Techno-Aesthetics, the letter ranges through the domains of architecture, engineering, and art, invoking a specific conception of phanero-technics. In this piece, one example stands out, and that is the technical analysis of Da Vinci's Mona Lisa. In this analysis, Simondon traces the nature of the smile, its non-presence, and yet also its appearing. Now, I won't read from the entire segment, but certain things do come out from this reading. First, he starts with certain aesthetic objects call for a technical analysis. Then, the painting is essentially plural. It exists like a superimposition of itself. On the very same canvas, one encounters the beginning and the end of a smile, but not the exhaustion of the smile, the entelechy of the smile. It's only the two extreme terms of the smile that are painted and revealed. The smile's complete unfolding is read into the painting by those who contemplate it. They constitute this unfolding in their own individual or personal interiority. One wonders why a philosopher of technology, ostensibly concerned with machines and operations and the history of technics, should wish for the inclusion of art and religion in a philosophical project. His technical analysis of the painting makes no mention of the making of the work, nor the developing technique of sfumato, which softening and blurring imparts to Da Vinci's work its delicate aliveness and transcendent quality. Instead, the technical analysis emphasizes not the object nor the image per se, but a suspension embedded in the very appearing of the smile. Why the emphasis on the smile where it actually appears and virtually resides? What could this have to do with revitalizing the relationship between technology and society? The Mona Lisa operates like a prism of space-time. It acts on that which surrounds it, extracting from it, refracting it, transforming it, and reprising this action over again. Following Bergson, the prism is also a mirror, reflecting back when the respective densities of the surface are homologous. Instead of refraction, reduction to a luminous point, giving rise to a virtual image, a doubling and an excentering, an existence that is like the superposition of itself. This is not the first instance in which Simondon expands our notions of the technical. Since the mid-century, his ideas had been developing through multiple lenses, philosophical, physical, and psychosociological, in particular attuned to phenomena of emergence and developing theories in the domains of social and paleoanthropology, the psychology of perception, quantum mechanics and thermodynamics, information theory, and cybernetics. His methods are experimental as much as his thinking tends towards the metaphysical, and unlike many of his contemporaries in France, his vision for the future, in particular a future inclusive of technical objects, is filled with optimism. His 1958 dissertation, L'individuation à la lumière des notions de forme et d'information, develops a new theory of individuation in the light of new knowledge from physics, the life sciences, and the information sciences. This presentation is published piecemeal over the next 5 decades. A parallel publication, his secondary thesis on the mode of existence of technical objects, finds immediate publication and also attention, as it troubles the overarching concerns of the day regarding technology. The ideas that emerge in this work concerning our philosophical and social entanglements with technical objects, their inherent nature, their neuroses, and their epiphanies will continue to be developed throughout the next 2 decades. To begin, one notes the emphasis placed not on the object but on a mode of existence. Reading Simondon, the technical object is a crystallized human reality. By implication, this is not just about objects, but about the ways in which technics is entangled in human experience, and following the influence of paleoanthropologist André Leroy-Gourand, sociologist Marcel Mauss, and philosopher of religion Mircea Eliade, how the history and evolution of techniques develops in parallel with our own human cognitive and physiological evolution. In subsequent presentations, he will expand on the history of techniques from the beginnings of civilization and the instruments that amplified the power to extend and then transform our associated milieu. However, in the plates of the 1958 publication, the emphasis is not on the objects of an archaic or an industrial history, but on the everyday consumer objects of his day, which functionings would highlight some notion of transduction in the ways that this term was then understood and utilized across various domains of research. His emphasis is on objects that capture, transmit, convert, and transmute energies from one state or order of magnitude to another. The plates show us the eviscerating and grouping of vacuum tubes and their housings, telephones, motors and dynamos, socket wrenches, and then strangely as archetype, the windmills from Diderot's encyclopedia. His interest is in objects that capture and emit a signal, a luminance, or some other instance of a manifestation of unseen forces. His approach is less that of a technocrat than that of an alchemist engaging in rites of knowledge at the limit of acceptable practice. These objects are more than simple groupings. They are arrayed in sequences, as with the cathode tubes you see here, as if to further understand the essence of their functioning over the time and space of their evolution. Only through establishing the essential contours of the object, what he refers to as the ligne essentielle, could one hope to understand it fully. In photographs and sketches, these objects will find themselves exposed. Their interior dynamic that has carefully remained hidden beneath the exterior carapace is put on display in a bid to reveal the organism as a whole. More than curiosity, this is a search for a method enabling a fuller understanding of human and technical reality. For Simondon, understanding the lines of genesis, the ligne essentielle of the series of objects via induction, can be useful because defining a machine as the outcome of an input via deductive logic is simply not sufficient and results in missing many subtleties essential to their integration. Deduction does not capture forces of attraction, of repulsion, or the structuring via analogy of a concrete extent. C'est le lien avec le concret qui manque dans la déduction. The concrete is everything that deduction is not. The mechanism that reveals this movement of integration is Simondon's conception of transduction as an enchaining that allows for a particular notion of human and technological development. Transduction is also referred to as technicity, as a transitory reality that is both result and principle. It starts with a break. The break involves a split in the magical unity, a universe rich in potentials, and the separation into two separate modes of existence. The profane world of technics with its specialization of figural functions, and then the sacred world of religion. Unfortunately, the diagram is cut here. The sacred world of religion, and in other words, for Simondon, it's the ground. So the world of technics will evolve into the domain of sciences, and the world of religion evolves into the domain of ethics. There are many other splits that concern Simondon and his work. From this break will issue all other mutually exclusive dualities that fuel the Western metaphysics projects: subject and object, spirit and matter, nature and the human, body and mind, etc. Technicity, in this case, is the movement that affords a mediation of this split. This originary rupture is at work in the writings of Mauss, Eliade, and many others, and for Simondon, as a force of divergence, it generates an equally fundamental counterforce, the convergence of the disparate. Now here disparate in French is a word for the ill-matched, or that which is assembled of odd pieces. The way this ensemble of forces works is quite different from the Hegelian notion, resolution of opposites, the thesis-antithesis that resolves as synthesis, which is really founded, according to Simondon, on the negation of all that ill fits. Rather, the ensemble of forces, divergence, convergence, generate a state of suspension between its extreme terms. The full character of the extreme terms remains, and in this sense, like the smile, the split does not occasion a loss, but a promise of discovery. Pardon me. Simondon writes that we must save the technical object, and above all, never condemn it. The technical object's condemnation is obsolescence. When it is perceived as being no longer viable, either due to changing tastes or to the breakdown of internal coherence that leads to the ensemble no longer functioning as a unity, the object's useful life ends. The example he gives is of a rusting car body. The unequal attention paid to the detail in the manufacture leads to the unfortunate loss of the entire technical edifice. Simondon would restore the technical edifice by constructing the two extreme poles of his analysis. Again, the split serves to generate the understanding of what makes the phenomenon under consideration tick. On the one hand, the technical object must appear according to the transient dictates of markets and consumer tastes to satisfy that frenzy of novelty, rather than to be integral to its technical essence. The functional gap, which he calls décalage, also translated as an altering or a shifting or a displacement or lag, this décalage occasion sets up a dynamic tension between the object's inherent technicity and its appearance. Sometimes this external appearance is not necessarily applied, but curated. A specific quality is emphasized for reasons extraneous to the object itself. This inside-outside dynamic is referred to as cryptotechnics and phanero-technics. What must be saved is not the object's outward appearing or appearance, but its whether curated or applied, but its capacity to manifest and reveal in a manner integral to its conditions of existence. Next to the condemned that must be saved are the condemned that must transgress, and in order to save themselves and us all. In this case, transgression is creation and the only way forward. According to Simondon, had Adam and Eve not transgressed and been expulsed from the garden, they would not have seeded the first humans, nor the first inventors. Simply put, for him, transgression is technique, reinvention. La véritable technologie est une réinvention. The real technology invites reprise, which transgresses that 20th century ideal of teleological progress. The transgression inherent in to technical objects, the transgression inherent to techniques is the movement of reappearing. The cryptotechnic phanero-technic dance hides the object's functioning under a carapace the better to enter into what he refers to as the citadel of culture. The mask that selectively reveals a part of its functioning also serves to amplify or aggrandize the whole, making it part of its consumable appeal. However, this is not the entire story. There is a continuous spectrum that connects aesthetics to techniques. A simple cadmium nut and bolt offers iridescence and variations that remind one a little of the colors of the fluoride lenses, the colors of a pigeon's throat. And this is from Simondon's letter to Derrida. In the tension between what an object is, how it appears, and what it could be, there is a suspension of resolution, which imparts a fuzziness or blurring. Reading Simondon, in the technical object, not everything coalesces. There's a certain blurring that is best filled in by an assemblage that is not only functional, but also pleasing to the eye. The gap allows one to fill in, to introduce an extra into the work itself. As for example, in also the letter to Derrida, he refers to the Facombe cutting shear for all its functional simplicity as being resplendent in the way it holds itself, imparts a sense of satisfaction to the hand and to the person holding it. Much like the smile, which doubled exists in the liminal space of the painting and the contemplation, the ritual hiding and revealing raises the object to a level that is rich in associations, surpassing the limits of itself and its cultural limitations. Real technical progress can only happen then. By exceeding its stated functionalities, the way opens to a new dimension, what Simondon calls synergistic alliance of technical schemas and natural powers. This new dimension structures itself as a reticulation of key points, assembling a world that incorporates the domain of the technical as constructed and the domain of the sacred as a harnessing of ground forces. Aesthetic activity preserves precisely this structure of reticulation, thus reprising the first structure of the universe, magical unity. Now, this reticulation or this synergistic alliance of technical schemas and natural powers, Simondon will refer to as technophany. So, in a slightly different connotation of phanero-technics, technophany is a sort of a surpassing of the object itself. To reenact magical unity, reticulation is not without a risk. Aesthetic thought and technical progress balance on a shimmering knife's edge, suspended between intuition and calculation. In The Forge and the Crucible, Mircea Eliade describes technical operations whose origin is ritualized and part of the sacred order of things, especially when flirting with the very limit of knowledge, such as with the transmutation of metals. Rites of initiation often end in sacrifice. The risk involved in creativity recalls its original transgression. In 1960-61, recounting the ancient story of the Chinese forger's wife who threw herself into the crucible in order for a pour to take, Simondon, mutatis mutandis, will equate the act of sending men into space for the first time as one such act of sacrifice. Mutatis mutandis, indeed, as the technical operation he refers to in this case, would become known as Apollo 1, which indeed did end in tragedy. Its 3 astronauts burned to a crisp within their command module during a pre-launch test. The command module chillingly harbors a resemblance to a crucible. Reading Simondon, the aesthetic character of an act or a thing is its function of totality, its existence both objective and subjective, as an outstanding point of a new reticulation of the universe. Returning through our prism of space-time to where we began, It's curious to find two different universes between the text written originally in French and its double as an English translation. A curious décalage is revealed in this superimposition. The same two extreme terms of the smile are painted and revealed, and yet, in this temporal thickness, two radically different moments are described. While in the one, unfolding, I read, one encounters the beginning and the end of the smile, but not the exhaustion of the smile, the entelechy of the smile, end quote. In the other we read, mais pas le sourire épanoui, l'entelechy du sourire. Somewhere in that temporal thickness, in the chain that hangs between two extreme terms of a smile, a radiance shines, exhausting itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marisabel. There must be 100 questions. Do you think this is a slightly different reading from Simondon, or just like highlighting? Simondon is always a bit of a jungle of terms, and to put it mildly, and very transdisciplinary. So that's why a lot of people read him in so many ways. And do you think like this is a different reading?
I think that the particular, I don't, in the sense of the readings that I've come across, there is much more of an emphasis on the technical object in its relation to the hylomorphic model. But what it's not really discussed very much is, I think, the way Simondon is also engaging with consciousness and the idea that there is something in excess of technology that he's interested in capturing. And that is a very difficult one to address, because it really does take us beyond a certain comfort level with regard to talking about objects. At least for me, it has been. And so that is it's a very interesting. It's what makes it very interesting also to pursue as research.
Yeah, because you need rigor there. Now let's try to figure this out, because I admire Simondon, but only for 50%, and there are many issues. And one is neologisms, which of course we know from French philosophy. But the problem I have is that he doesn't seem to be fully aware of the history of morphogenesis, and especially its German roots. And if you just do a proper reading of the late Kant or Schelling, Fichte, all those people, they address many of these issues 50 years before Darwin, so I see that Simondon tries to address this with the term milieu, but it is a weak term in the sense that you can explain crystallization from a milieu, right? That's clear. It comes right out of a liquid, and there's a point when this system flips into a structured entity, which is a crystal. But that completely fails to explain the technical object, because the technical object has history and a crystal doesn't have history. So that's where the Germans come in. They're very clear about the structure of evolution. That's why Darwin stood on their shoulders. It's clear that there's a drive. They call it a drive. The Germans are obsessed with this idea of will or drive, Trieb, right? So that's vertical. That's a vertical. That's this volcanism, this idea of that there is a layers of ages, a geology of forms that go all the way back till there's no bottom anymore, there's no ground. There's just this sort of vertical abyss of forms before forms. And then there is this form existing in their own presence, which is actual, you know. So for Schelling, that's unbedingt, it's vertical, and bedingung, that's conditions, are horizontal. That's the milieu, right? So the milieu is something that relates to all that is present, while the past, you know, sort of lives before in all those forms, and has this incredible history. And I feel that, like with his tables, he calls them lignes and shell. But it's a weak term compared to milieu. I find it's like he's grabbing from different disciplines, but he doesn't fully integrate. And I feel that's a sort of a misreading of history. How do you feel about that? Because I mean, concepts have history, right? And so they're very strong in that sense. And that only allows you to put neologisms in, like, very seldomly or very precisely. So how do you feel about that?
With regard to, I think to my mind, I think he is, in terms of the history, it's very difficult to parse sometimes where some of his ideas are coming from. As you know, that's sort of been some of what we have been, what I have been sort of working with in this time. I think what he was trying to do, or in this, is not, well, he wrote a history of individuation, but that history of individuation is really more of a philosophical history of individuation, as it applied across philosophies since the pre-Socratics. In terms of the morphogenesis of organisms, he seems to actually be much more interested in sort of the development of perception and how we perceive these rather than the object itself. And that's where I think the technical object, you know, his definition of the technical object is not the object itself, it's the object and everything else, all the conditions that really encompass it. And you know, and that is, you know, that becomes then very difficult to kind of just isolate the object in his study.
Yeah, but it's called object for a reason. There's an object. So okay, if we have a usual morphogenetic analysis, we have this type of vertical analysis. How do forms emerge out of either conditions or out of history or whatever? But that never speaks of consciousness or perception. So somehow this blooming of something that has internal workings and then sort of meets the light, or so to speak, comes to the light in the word of production. That involves perception then, right? So somehow this material, there we go, it gets difficult. So there's a
jump. That's the jump that's really hard to make that, you know, he makes that jump. But
yeah, so I'm thinking like, okay, so we get this table where we see lanterns, you know, and we see like cathodes and electrical light, all like sort of posited, like, table, but there's no proper structure to that image or that diagram, and that sort of worries me, because I would like to know how would he structure that, because it's not just about light, it's really what you call this surpassing of a technical object. Let's make clear this. There's to any object there's two jobs. Right, it has to do work internally, especially a technical object has to do work internally or with other objects, but it also has to appear. Right, and this makes him so different from Heidegger, because with Heidegger, objects can hide, right? They hide in Zuhandenheit in this constant sort of subliminal familiarity of wohnen, of habit. That we just grab the doorknob or we open the door, whatever, sort of subliminally, and things keep sort of under the radar of perception. And that's not what he says. Simondon is very clear that things need to surpass themselves and shine actually before they can actually and actually sacrifice. Sacrifice is an extreme form of gift, right? So
Well,
that's
it's
there's in different languages the word sacrifice is offer, and things offering themselves. So they
mhm,
don't necessarily die while they offer themselves. That's just an extreme version of it.
mhm.
But there is a clearly a little relationship to mouse and the gift here. It's like, okay, that level, that coming out of morphogenesis and presenting themselves into the light
Mhm,
is a notion of gift,
mhm.
right? So
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying to say, is that there's not a singular material route from the object and its morphogenesis to our holding it or using it. There's these images or perceptions that are constantly mixed in and actually allow that thing to be displaced or reinvented, uh,
right.
and be
And so that
used.
displacement is really important. So that, I mean, like you're saying, I agree that those tables, they don't really show what he's tracking. They're basically more like taxonomies and the sort of the kind of classic 19th century sort of way of arranging objects. But I think as he begins to evolve this idea of, and I have to say that as well, let me just finish. As he begins to evolve this idea of phanero-technic, crypto-technic, which is this kind of, it is a constant, a movement that it is, and it's the movement that actually is generated by this, what he calls that a décalage, right? The things that's ill-fitting, that's not quite at that point, something has fallen, is not in a kind of a coherent way. The object is no longer coherent to itself. Then, for him, that's very necessary. That is the only way that you can progress. So it's a
Well,
slightly different idea of progress that he's trying to develop
yeah,
here that's very different from that sort of idea of technological progress from the 19th century. Because, again, part of this is also he's seeing this as part of the problem that's happening in the mid-century where people are beginning to fear technology, right? So he doesn't want to have that happen. So I find that dynamic very interesting. The crypto-technic, phanero-technic, but even in itself, it's not sufficient because I think then you have, in the sense that it is basically like a mechanism that allows the object to continue to evolve and also continue, and the milieu to continue to evolve, right? But then there's this other term that he introduces, which is the term technophany, which is a quasi, almost taking it to the point of like a religious almost experience that as we all know, or as you know, he was a very religious man, and the sort of the idea that this could almost be the technical aesthetic. The technical as an aesthetic experience to him is almost like an epiphany or hierophany. So
mhm.
this, for him, so there's a, while those tables in that initial publication, so those tables are from the 1958 publication, there aren't very many diagrams actually. So he's really proceeding. He's, I think, trying to find a method. It's mostly illustrative, but at a certain point after the publication in the 60s and 70s, he starts to really develop this idea of cryptotechnics, of phanero-technics, to the point where you begin to understand there's almost a diagram. Yes, there's a diagram that has to be done that really shows, how he's kind of seeing this ill-fitting as a very necessary component for this radiance. And then this radiance is a necessary component for this what he calls reticulation. That's another really, interesting diagram that has to be done that also has to be distinguished from the idea of network, because for him, this cannot happen with the preset sort of nodes of a network. It's actually almost as it's like crystallization. It's building and moving outward. All of these terms, so reticulation being that term that he introduces as a very important component of that sort of final realization for technology as an aesthetic experience, or as what he calls aesthetic thought. In that sense, those plates really are very the beginning of him trying to find a method. Whether he actually was able to other than in writings and in sort of, I would say in his sort of philosophical or theoretical musings, really able to show that experimentally. I think that is something that's a good question. I don't think he really arrived at that point to show that.
It's interesting though, this religious component, because it allows for the thinking of transcendence.
Yeah.
And morphogenesis is normally understood as pure immanence, right? As something bubbling up from a physis, right? Pure physis means genesis, right? That's morphogenesis. Right. And here you get those verticals, but there are mini verticals, and then they slip sideways into displacements. Why? Because they transcend. So they're more than what you think they are. Mm-hmm, right. Mm-hmm. So it's not a simple chain. It's a chain that has well, I wouldn't say weak links, but it actually has links that are not. Of course, that's the reason why out of this romantic thinking we got industrial progress, right? Which became a fully materialist understanding of the idea of morphogenesis and emergence, right? That there's some kind of vertical. Well, I wouldn't say a chain of being, but a chain of becoming. Right. Yeah, where things sort of logically or via this sort of power of emergence and drive, because that's the old term for it, trieb. Right. Now there's this vertical, but then there's these shifts, and of course that would be able to map. You would be able to map that. So I'm thinking again, how do you get some rigor into your research? In the sense that, I've once seen Frederick Kiesler. I'm not sure if he's known to everybody, this sort of 1950s architect. He did a beautiful diagram of knives, an evolutionary diagram of knives. And you see how sort of the hand axe with its serrations and its points, it sort of separates into a dagger and a sword and a saber, and then a pocket knife, and a bread knife. And you get this sort of all these different jumps. But that's quite a sort of continuous understanding. And of course, you always try to sort of find what you can explain, but with these ideas of displacements, you get like really weird things. I remember Sabri talking about the iPhone. I'm always thinking, like, what is the moment that the iPhone realized it can do portrait art? When it can, how, at what point do we get this hybrid of the camera and then and with the iPhone, and then this incredible creation of like Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, this completely new field where suddenly there's images again and not conversations. Suddenly instead of like talking to each other, with senders and receivers, all this sort of logical chain of information and communication, suddenly we get these billions of images per year that nobody properly understands. There's like you click them, like them, dislike them. So these images, the power of the image as a sort of sliding away of the technology, going sideways and not being sure in what direction. That would be an example, I think, in my mind, to have a sort of as a displacement. It's just stunning to think of if you compare, let's say, the portrait art of the 1500s, how many portraits there were, or in Dutch art in the 1700s or whatever, and you compare that to the number of portraits that are now produced per year. And selfies, it's just stunning, it's just incredible. And that would be another map, for instance. I'm just thinking, like, how would you map displacements? How would you find those? And how would you argue them?
Yeah, the whole idea of mapping has been something that I've, as you know, I've really struggled with, and I think that has to do with there's almost it's more than a diagram in the sense that it has to encompass a lot of when he's talking about all these different levels of individuation. Mm-hmm. Not all of them can exist on one plane. Mm-hmm. And so that really makes it, that's been really my, in many respects in this research, is the representation, oddly enough, of it is hard to figure out, I think, in that sense, because And it has to do with the fact that, if you can map a technological object from the point of view of all the different sort of phases of individuation or types of individuation that he lists, we're not going to get into that individuation. That's all part of his primary thesis, which was, has only now begun to become translated. But if you try to really truly do what he's doing or thinking visually, I have been grappling with that because it cannot exist all in one plane, and I'm almost wondering if it's even dimensional, that you can do it as something three-dimensional. So it is actually something I've thought a lot about with regard to that.
Well,
that
this
issue.
is a fabulous topic because there's probably a lot of people here either thinking of pursuing a PhD or they have already pursued a PhD. But we know from different universities how stringent and how precise. I get emails from people complaining in different universities that how the professors check their text and if it's explicational enough, if it's like if it really follows all the steps and is a very precise regime of arguing, and that means you have a problem with people like Simondon who flip from one discipline to another. So I'd be really interested in how these type of maps could be part of a PhD research without without losing its rigor. Obviously, that's because we need a rigor, and it needs to be able to defend. Right? It needs to. If you're defending an argument that goes stepwise in your defense of a PhD, that's quite different than showing a map. That's obvious. But it would be so interesting to pursue that because I think it's very, very important. On the other hand, it needs to be strict and precise. I'm not sure if others have something to say about this, but.
I have a question that popped into my mind. If you want, I can articulate on this matter, which is really interesting to me too. In terms of the iPhone, it's normally labeled as the name giver to the TV series Black Mirror, right? So it's interesting that they call it Black and Mirror.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if Marisabel has anything to say, if Simondon has any idea of replication, reflection, or replacement of technology, because I tend to think that we're almost creating kind of an other image, and that image tends to reproduce us as well, right? Like the invention of iPhone generating images, and those images tend to actually kind of affect our limbic system as well, and limbic system is supposed to be the more animalistic side of us, we are actually unconscious of it. Right, so looking at images, looking at people actually triggers more appreciation or kind of an aesthetic effect on us. So I kind of see almost like a double mirroring, right? Us creating an object that has a part of us, and then that is kind of reflecting us in return. So I'm wondering if that idea has played any role in Simondon's thinking about technology, like this type of self-replication, mirroring.
The mirroring, I think the mirroring and does, in this presentation, I had to be very succinct. So, and I probably wasn't, but I think that there is a lot about Simondon's work. He was very, so to say that he was interested in that, yes, he was. He thought a lot about cyber. He was very interested in cybernetics. He had his own particular reservations about certain things, but he was certainly in contact with Norbert Wiener and had, interacted with him very much. He was also very interested in sort of how perception works, and it's not just from the philosophical point of view. So, he read, Bergson was a huge influence of his sort of the psychology of perceiving the image according to Bergson, not the image that you would find on the iPhone. But also, he did a lot of he taught courses on perception. So I think that very much that aspect that you're referring to, which is how does one thing separate from the other, or is there actually a true separation? Was behind this research, was really what was driving this idea. So the appearing that he understood as phanero-technics, I think it's a degree under technophany, but that appearing was actually something that he was trying to figure out how that happens, right? How does this thing appear? It's not just dividing an object into interiority and exteriority. It really had to do with also the consumer, because you have to, he's also writing in the 50s when actually there's this explosion.
What kind of word is that, consumer?
It's a word,
Come on, it's totally the wrong term. If you're interested in perception, who talks about consumer? That's a completely different understanding of this construct. That's a consumer doesn't displace.
No. The consumer doesn't displace. What I'm saying is that sort of like what I meant by that is that he's at that point really wanting to understand this appearance, which in the consumer society that he's in is taking it in a different direction.
Yeah.
And he's actually let me be specific. He's interested in two forms of appearing. One is he's interested in sort of understanding the social dynamic of this appearance as it's manifests in consumer objects. But then there's the other appearing, which I refer to as manifesting, which is actually what he truly wants to understand a little bit better, is how that happens, because that's also, something that is sort of generating the evolution of technology.
Bergson is so much more radical, in that, with Bergson, the image is part of matter. It's on the other side. It's not in our heads, it's in matter. It's over there. And that's such a radical idea, and that enables that object to slip sideways for us to pick out different images. That's a totally different idea, see? So I'm just afraid that Simondon is just like not well read enough philosophically, it's just like grabbing everywhere. But there's these are very powerful ideas, if you properly read like what Bergson was saying, there's a whole source to actually understand what this appearing could be. And so I think we have to be very clear about how things appear and then how we see them. That doesn't overlap. That doesn't have to be the same thing at all. And that's the whole reason why there's displacement. So that means when that thing morphogenetically comes to the light, it actually almost like a flower or like a tree, it sort of goes sideways and offers a whole set of images. And these are then sort of functioning in a society, but with different consumers or perceivers. But what I think is interesting is that there's this surpassing, and that there's notion of gift. The gift is not for somebody; it's a general gift, right? It's a general gift, and then you specify it by receiving it. That's quite a different construct. So I think, that there's the slippages. I think these displacements. I think they're a super interesting idea, this décalage, and that allows a thing also to be broken and to have an accident. Yeah. I think those are beautiful images you were showing. That things can actually appear when they're folded around the lamppost. That's very powerful, and but I think there needs to be clarity on sort of where's the image, and what does it actually allow. I think that would be so the technophany. I think in that sense it's much more this sort of blooming of an object and surpassing itself on the level of appearance, and then there's perception and all that phenomenology. Of course, he has to address that. We're in the 50s, but that's another act. I think that's another act upon that object. I don't think it's easy to fit Bergson with phenomenology, right? It's quite clear for Bergson there's two consciousnesses, if you can actually put that in plural. It's like one coming from things and one coming from us. There's always this double ontology for Bergson. Okay, we have to, it's a bit ridiculous. We just have 15 minutes left, but I will go over. We have a whole bunch of figures, 5 again, and we'll be starting with Hayden. on Hephaestus, and to sort of clarify a bit that split between ornament and automaton, also like because automaton clearly relates to robots and robots in our contemporary age, and again ornament and how that relates to a whole set of investigations we've been doing, not just in Greek culture but also in Indian culture and Chinese culture. So we'll start with Hayden, and then we go to Sabri and Juzar. Okay, Hayden, floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Lars. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So moving into the Miro board, well, that's coming up. I'll just reintroduce Hephaestus. As Lars said, he is the club-footed god. He's a forger. He's really the only god who sweats in this mythology, and he's also the only handicapped god. He was thrown out of Olympus and spends most of his time in a cave where his forge is. Okay. So now we're at the Miro board. I'll begin with a quote from Mayer's Gods and Robots. Talks about the blacksmith Hephaestus was lame and by some accounts had no father. Both his mother Hera and his wife Aphrodite, who for the purposes of this seminar we know as Aglaia, they rejected him, and he was even cast out of Mount Olympus for a time. Yet all the gods and goddesses were in awe of Hephaestus, and they called on the smithgod whenever they required something beautiful or clever in design and sublime craftsmanship. And this notion of beauty and cleverness, we'll evaluate those as we get into the dichotomy of automata and ornament. But there's also this critical notion of Daedala, and from Lars's book, Grace and Gravity, we see that Daedala is in reference to Daedalus, who is an inventor figure, but more often than not, when we talk about Daedala or its variations, they're mentioned in reference to the quality of works of Hephaestus. Because Daedala itself can mean various things as forge, manufacture, to make, to see, to place on, to weave, and etc. And so moving into automata, we have this intricacy of craft, and these are the cleverness of things that are cunningly crafted. First off, we have Talos, who is this giant bronze figure that Hephaestus crafted, and it stands guard over Crete. And you see Talos would run around the island rapidly, and he had a single blood vessel extended from his neck down to his ankles, and at the lower end, it was in place of a bronze stud. So obviously there is mechanics involved in this intricately crafted automaton, but he is also a living figure. He is a being of magic, and he is crafted out of bronze, which is partially made out of precious metals, and we'll see moving into the other automata that they are all also crafted out of precious metals. There's references to Hephaestus creating a pair of animated bronze horses to draw the chariots of various gods, and to create winged chariots so they don't even need horses. And then Pandora was forged by Hephaestus at the command of Zeus, and as well as her box. So this is the first woman, and the creation story is that she was forged out of metal. And then various guard dogs are made out of precious metals such as gold and silver. And in Homer's Odyssey, they are described as deathless and ever unaging, and standing constant watch over the various precious things. And we also have tripods, and in Hephaestus's forge, he uses tripods and other automated devices to assist him throughout his work. And here in the Iliad, there's an excerpt here talking about he was working, he was sweating as he turned here and there to his bellows and busily, since he was working on 20 tripods that were to stand against the wall of his strong founded dwelling. And he had set golden wheels underneath the base of each one, so that their own motion, so of their own motion, they could wheel into the immortal gathering and return to his house. And they were a wonder to look at. So there's this notion of Daedala with just a general creation of wonder, and there's also this sense of this precious metal giving the tripods their own. It's magic, really. So there is technical aspects, but there's also this wonder of indescribable magic, really. And then also we have another excerpt here of from Mayer, the Mayer reading, talking about how Thetis would seek out Hephaestus to create armor for her son Achilles. She finds him glazed with sweat, working at his anvil, an abode made of bronze, where he is aided by various automated devices, and we have a depiction here of these sentient beings made out of metal. And that leads us into Ornament with Thetis, Thetis appearing to Hephaestus and requesting a helmet, richly decorated shield, and chest and leg armor, more fabulous than any other ever made. The shield was the centerpiece of fine bronze, tin, silver, and gold, and forged in 5 layers and with a triple ply rim. And so these are made for Achilles, her son. And we have here several depictions of the shield of Achilles, which is quite overworked and very elaborate. As Lars mentioned earlier, it is more about the appearance of the craft than necessarily its usefulness. But it is made of these precious metals, so therefore it is endowed with the qualities that the gods gave these precious metals. And here we have descriptions of the depictions of on the shield. Moving from the center ring going outwards, we have the earth, the sky, the sea, the sun, and the moon. And then there's 2 cities, one with the wedding and one with the feuding army. A field being plowed, a king's estate, a vineyard with grape pickers, a herd of straight-horned cattle, a sheep farm, a dancing floor, and a great stream. And so there are, or an infinite stream, really. And so essentially the whole world is depicted on this shield, and so it's very elaborate and very ornamental. And then we have also, moving with the shield, we have the armor of Achilles. And from the Fontesi reading we had, there are many different interpretations of Daedala, and some of them are weaving, some of them are forged, as we saw earlier. And so with this classical armor here, it's quite obviously ornamental, and it really, relating to hanging, because this is the hanging lecture, it's metal, it's rigid, it's very ornamental, but the metal needs support and is dependent on wood or leather. We talked about earlier how the armor, when it's properly fitted in this case, it actually necessitates a gap because movement only happens when the armor is hanging instead of pressed against the body. And then with this notion of dependency of metal, talks about the fabrication of these Daedala must rest on 2 operations, cutting and assembly. And so you see here in the armor on the right, it has been cut. It has a quite obvious seam down the middle. and it has been reassembled and is missing the leather strappings that would have held it together when in use. And we also have depictions of Hera, who is Hephaestus's mother. She's often represented in draped in gold and having precious weavings hanging from her body, and she also has quite prominent earrings. There aren't many depictions of that, but like Hera earrings are quite popular today. And from the Fantisi reading, we have the weaving of gold attests Herodotus must have continued to relate to textile products and metallurgical works, using precious metals of the analogous effects and variation and luminosity. So obviously this is calling back on the there's a combining of weaving and metalwork in Daedala, because there's this intricacy of craft and design that goes into ornament, and there is a lot of forgive me, there's overworking of these precious metals and how they're used in hanging. And then also, forgive me, sorry, my computer is quite blurry right now. Hold on. Okay, so moving up into, we have this statue of Zeus in his throne, or at his throne, talking about because Hephaestus forged all of the golden thrones for the gods in Olympus. In Frontisi we see that wood and metal and textile and wood, these materials, which seems to constitute distinct categories, all belong to specific technical fields, are thus object to a vast series of relations. And remembering back from the armor, how metal cannot exist in a functional sense without the assistance of other materials. We see here, even in this grand statue, the metal is dependent on other materials, and they're gilded, and obviously they have their own qualities of ornamentation. And then also we have the production of metal objects cannot be conceived as a totally autonomous activity, and so everything, again, with this metal is hanging and is dependent on other things. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Aidan. We are actually going to look at a figure that is a continuation of the second event, where I presented the formulation of the crab and the seal that is extracted from Détienne's reading, where he talks about Hephaestus. And Hayden actually talked a lot about Hephaestus, but I would only kind of repeat that he's the creator of the golden automata, and there's also the figure of the Talos that is more like an anthropocentric depiction of a robot automaton, and there are also these self-moving tripods. They're almost like servants, and I was thinking how that idea could be extended through this chiastic bundle of the crab and the seal, and whether we can actually maybe try to find some structure within the robots that we have right now. So I'm going to actually start with this distinction that I talked in the second lecture. Basically, the Hephaestus has two aspects: the club feet and the crooked fingers. So that kind of affects how he becomes dexterous with his hands, and also has kind of a probably limping motion as well, like the seal. And these aspects kind of affect his kind of technological creations as well. So when we focus on the crab, I actually found it in these sorts of limb robots. So I'm trying to make a distinction between not only the crab and the seal, but also between limbs and torsos. So basically, whether this type of dichotomy also is found in the body and the type of robots that we observe around us doing the work for us. And this is actually extracted from Wilson's text, The Hand. Basically, when we look at the arm is actually a self-balancing organ protruding from our body, and it has two parts, the forelimb and the scapula. And when we look at the industrial robots, especially in this case, we are looking at the Tesla factory, we find a linear system, the assembly line, and distribution of fixed robots within confined areas, and they're doing a lot of flexible work. But in order to do that flexible work in the hand space, they actually have to memorize the space because they need to know where to get the parts and they need to know where to weld. So all of their movement has to be choreographed, and that's basically the expression of the limbs, the flexibility, the movement, the expression of the hand space. And I think this also relates more to freedom, innovation, and work. So these limb robots actually take up some of that type of creative aspects of what we have to produce industrially. And Wilson talks about these arms actually preserving their physical presence in our body because they have some sort of imprinted memory in our consciousness. Although we have diverged from other specimens that were hanging in trees, it's possible to say that the arm not only evolved, but also it's acquired some of its dexterity, so that we can actually use it for creative purposes. And I think that's also could be tied to it being a hanging forelimb as well. So that type of hanging is actually related to its freedom. So if you move if you move down a bit, maybe we look at the crab first. If we can move a bit down, sorry. Yeah. So as I was saying, so when we look at the arm, particularly the distinction between the scapula and the forelimb, we actually see that type of polar structure. So the scapula is almost working like a counterweight to the hanging upper limb that is doing all the dexterous work. And Wilson is talking about the expression of agonist and antagonist muscles, these sorts of expansive and contractive motions. And we also find it in a lot of robots and animals as well. So, for instance, the Spot developed by Boston Dynamics is capable of opening a door with the single arm protruding from its body. And I also looked at other examples like the drones and that are basically winged, or these search bots that have more broken geometry. I think that's kind of a characteristic of the limb robots. So they have more broken geometry, and the torso robots tend to be more closed. They are more rounded. And going to Alita also expresses a lot of flexibility and maneuverability, right? So that's, I think, also the advancement of the limbs. So they're not bulky. They're highly flexible, and that's something we also find in the depiction of the Spider-Man. So when he actually upgrades his suit, he gets more limbs, right? So he needs to acquire more mobility. He needs to be still flexible. So I think he opts for getting more limbs compared to like becoming more powerful or being more torso-oriented. So I think this is kind of a limb-oriented hero in that sense. So let's move to torso robots on the right side. So I'm basically expanding on this idea and exploring it. And the torso robots, compared to limb robots, they express more horizontal movement. And I think the the main example of this is in the Amazon warehouses, where there are a lot of autonomous robots. And here we see the kind of relationship to space being reversed, because the torso robots kind of operate in a space that is flexible, but their movement has to be choreographed, so it has to become memorized. So that's why they work a lot with QR codes, sensors, and they have to be hooked to a central nervous system almost. So I think this type of robots relate more to memory, logistics, and labor in that sense. And when we explored the foot space of the torso robots, we also find that these robots as pure torsos, they move horizontally, they don't have any arms, and they actually move objects or items that are temporarily fixed. So in the factory line, assembly line, where the Tesla is being developed, we kind of see continuous movement along a line, like the movement of the crab that moves in an oblique way, but it's halted temporarily so that the robotic arms can come in and manipulate the object. Whereas in this case, we see continuous movement, and the objects are temporarily fixed as well. So that's, I think, interesting kind of reversals and expressions of movement, memory, and the type of flexibility that these systems offer. And I also looked at Simondon's text on techno-aesthetics, and I was also wondering if this sort of dichotomy between limb robots and torso robots also creates certain aesthetics that are embedded into technology, because Simondon talks about the fusing of aesthetics and technology. So aesthetic, for instance, he describes the Gabbard Bridge designed by Eiffel, Gustav Eiffel, and he gives it as an expression of the techno-aesthetic work, where basically it's not only functional, successful, and beautiful, but there's a merging of technology and aesthetics. And he also goes on to articulate that this sort of aesthetic effect maybe conditions the type of objects that are further produced. So I looked for like other expressions of torso-oriented objects or robots and animals. And here, for instance, you're looking at the delivery torso robot developed by Amazon, and the way it delivers the item to the consumer is by just opening a hatch to the torso, right? So there is no arm, actually. There's no act of giving. Literally, it's just an opening up. And we also find it in a lot of the animals, like the flatfish, snail, but also the aesthetics, the rounded aesthetics of Fort Ka, or the Amazon Alexa and Google Home. So they're kind of like rounded and closed torso objects. And going down, I also gave a lot more examples in like the Tesla Cybertruck, which is basically an exoskeleton, so it becomes a pure expressive torso. And compared to Spider-Man, we also see that the Iron Man's upgrade becomes more about the expression of the torso, right? So it becomes more strong. And in the earlier event, like in the third event, we explored the movement of these two characters, but basically to find stability, Iron Man has to be more torso-oriented, so it kind of flies using boosters, so it flies along a line. So when it further upgrades, of course it gets bulky, heavy, but it still needs thrusters to actually jump and move. So I think that's also kind of a play on how he uses technological advancement. And these are some of the other torso-oriented robots, like autonomous swimming fish robots to Roomba and snake bots. So these are lacking kind of further limb development that we find. And I thought this might be interesting as a chiastic model for the exploration of technology in robots. And I also have another section where I looked at the development of intelligence. It's further up on the right side. Maybe we go look at that one quickly. Where I looked at artificial intelligence and intelligence augmentation. So this was argued by Markov's text of Machines of Loving Grace, where he's kind of debating of this comparison of kind of giving two possibilities for humanity, whether these robots or machines are going to liberate us or they're going to enslave us. So some of the scientists believe that artificial intelligence is not anthropocentric. It's more about microchips and autonomous robots, whereas intelligence augmentation is more human-oriented. So it's more about creating a human-machine hybridization and cyborgs and enhancing our abilities. So we find some examples of this, for instance, in the powered exosuit or the Neuralink being developed by Elon Musk as well. So this idea that we can maybe improve our cognitive and physical abilities with these intelligent systems. And it's also in the text, there are two depictions are given for the future. So one of them is where the machines that we have created create kind of this prosperous new Athens model, where we can enjoy all of our free time doing science, art, and enjoying life itself. Or they can also lead to the generation of autonomous super weapons, right? Kind of like enslaving us. So that type of contrasting perspective of the ethics of technologies being speculated. And this is also the other types of examples, like the autonomous driving and the Atlas video developed by Boston Dynamics. I also wanted to include them as examples as well. Thank you.
Okay, I think the puppet is next. Do you guys hear me clear? Yes? Okay. So to start, there are some considerations to make. Number one, king as a puppeteer. Number two, puppet as a dwarf. And number three, the in-between, dwarf as a jester with a rapid mirror to the king. The relationship is always ambiguous from the perspective of first, from the king downward, he's in an elevated great position. And from the puppet upward as a mirroring or in a sort of a parody, comedy, epiry, sarcasm, etc. Puppets are both dwarfs, distortions, and dolls, small model, imitative play. So we have a puppet-puppeteer relationship as a king-jester relationship. A king with a radiant headgear and a puppet dwarf holding up a mirror. So let's start with from the top with the radiance of the king headpiece and build our way down. In figures of speech, ornament, Kumarasamy writes, whatever is ornamented is said to be naked. God, taken naked of all ornament, is unconditioned or unqualified. Ornament, he is endowed with qualities. Ornamented, he is endowed with qualities. Appropriate ornament is then essential to utility and beauty. So this, what you have seen here is a drawing of a stela found in the ancient Maya city of Tikal, Guatemala. We can see the magnificence and impressive size of the headpiece of the ruler Kak Tiliwichak, while both pendants and rings connotate a certain form of movement. The ornament that is most intimately connected with mobility, according to Semper, is the headgear. Whether feathers of a plum hat or the crest of a military helmet emphasizes the direction of movement. Semper calls the directional ornament the most spiritual of all ornaments because it projects the grace, movement, character, and the expression of appearance. Henrik von Kleist said that by becoming puppets, we become gods. The image to the right of the black one, of the ruler, is of the Aztec god Tezcatlipoca, as depicted in the Codex Borgia. His name can be translated as smoking mirror, and alludes to his connection to obsidian, the material from which mirrors were made in Mesoamerica. Performing with a puppet helps develop the ability to act as a puppet's mirror. So we have the king as a puppeteer. And as we know, the puppet allows dreams to take shape, to be manifest externally. The puppet is never troubled emotionally and can perform actions that are impossible for the puppeteer. Of course, the puppeteer's manipulation plays an important part in consolidating the illusion. The puppeteer can imagine and create circumstances and situations that allow his character to defy the laws of gravity and split its body into several parts. Sam Harris says we are nothing but biochemical puppets that mechanically create the cognitive illusion of our own free will. The questions to ask are who is manipulating whom, for what purpose, and for whom. So if we going down to the in-between row, we have the dwarf as a jester with a rapid mirror to the king. And let's start with that image. Let's start with the image from the Mayan clay vessel dated probably from the year 600 or 900 AD in the region of Petén, Guatemala. It was customary during the late Maya period to represent Mayan lords looking at themselves in a mirror held by a dwarf. The polished shine of the obsidian with which the mirrors were made allowed the ruler to reflect. It was surely a magical situation where the individual split into two, as can be seen in this image. If you want to zoom a little bit in, Perry. In the back, we also can see the figure of a hunchback carrying another dwarf who is drinking from a vessel. And at the top, there's a drawing of that image for more clarity. The next image is a small sculpture of a dwarf holding a mirror. A dwarf was likely to be a lifelong companion of the kings in Mayan culture, and a lot of dwarfs depicted in Mayan art are holding obsidian. The next pair of images are from the 19th century. You can pan to the left. It's the dwarf Doña Mercedes by Ignacio Zuloaga. We not only see the distorted body of the dwarf, but also the distortion produced by the sphere. We have a double effect. The representation of a dwarf with a crystal ball had been used before by Luis Méndez Pidal in a painting entitled The Jester's Mirror, a jester dressed in a fashion of the 17th century. And the last image of the second row is limestone stela from El Perú, Guatemala. The piece dates to 685 AD. One of the most striking elements of this figure is the headdress. It is a large accessory and appears to be made of feathers, showing this person's wealth and high social status. In addition, the feathers also invite us to think of a celestial space, referring to a higher world that is above the earthly one. And the figure to the right is a dwarf and carries an item in his hands, perhaps some offering, a gift, or a mirror. Moving down to the bottom row, we have the puppet as dwarf. And there are two paintings from the 17th century. The first one is the portrait of a dwarf by Jaime y Leon. It shows a sumptuously dressed and armed dwarf holding a ruler's staff, an attribute of power that cannot have correspond to his status. The next one is Prince Balthasar Charles with a dwarf by Diego Velázquez. The prince is shown in the uniform of a captain. general. The dwarf holds an apple and a rattle to contrast with the heir to the most powerful monarchy in Europe. It is interesting to see the contrast of the prince's static postures versus the dynamism of the dwarf figure. Moving to the right, we have a set of images from the Mesoamerican culture. The first one is an anthropomorphic figure of a dwarf from the classic Mayan period. He wears a shell pectoral that distinguished court officials. The dwarves, hunchbacks, and other beings with malformations made them being considered as sacred beings for the Mayans because their special physique. They form part of the elite and courts, being respectable noblemen. The middle image is taken from a hieroglyph stairway leading to a structure in the Mayan city in Chiapas, Mexico, and it's shown two Mayan little persons, or alush, dating to the year 757. The alush were mythological creatures believed to be small dwarf-like. Mayans believed that the alush was called into being when a farmer built a little house on his maize field, and for the next 7 years, the alush helped the corn to grow and protected from his predators. But after 7 years, the farmer had to close the windows and doors of the little house, sealing the alush inside. If this was not done, the alush ran wild and started playing tricks on people. The next one is an ancient Totonac articulated figure, or títere, dated from the 300 AD. It has a hole in the upper part of the head to tie a rope from there. It has been said that they use it to illustrate their sacred books with allegories of dolls made with wood or clay, like this one. The next image, if you want to pan to the, is Hoggle, a fictional character from the 1986 film Jared's Labyrinth. Although he looks like a goblin, he's actually a dwarf. My theory is that since he's surrounded by goblins and works for the Goblin King, he has learned to mimic their appearance. One of his jobs was to collect shiny objects. Hoggle was at the time the most complicated puppet ever created. And the last image is a set of drawings done by Oskar Schlemmer students at the Bauhaus. Very puppet-like postures of the human body where they break into parts. We can see a square rib cage, the circle of the belly and head, the cylinder of the neck, etc., right? Marking the essential features of the body from its joints and movements, like with the puppet, where each movement has a center of gravity. And to conclude, I want to show you two videos. Maybe we can run it simultaneously because timing issues, they are about a little more than 2 minutes. One is a clip of Alejandro Jodorowsky's film, The Holy Mountain, released in 1973, where it shows the roughness, I would say, and the relation of the distorted and deformed dwarf, showing the way to the man that looks like Jesus, the king. The director even shows him hanging from the cross. And the other video is from an American master puppeteer, Basil Twist, with his beautiful act, the Stiltmen, a puppet with 16 strings attached to its joint limbs. His performance shows graceful movements, the smoothness.
Looks like a double performance, both of the puppet and of the puppeteer.
But there's no sound. The music is very beautiful. Maybe you guys can watch it later.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to that one, yeah. Oops.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, thank you, Harry. Over here, I was exploring and expanding the figure of the cosmic dancer Nataraja. Over here, it is Shalabhanji, a tree nymph, basically, and how the figure, the extreme form of contrapposto develops or develops between the hand space and the foot space. Basically, the foot space is the polyrhythmic field, and the field is actually by nature labyrinthine, spiraling. So, and the hand space is basically the polychromatic object space, as if, and it is a contoured nature space, and the object is everything but planar. It is contoured, closed on itself, contracted. And on the right, you see a small image of just above it, a small image of a pot. It's a ritual pot used as part of the spiral dance, which is kept in the center and lit from within. And it is basically the nature of the object itself. Things and hands cannot do without one another. The hand grasps things as tangible, discrete, and a priori. The notion of thing is built in the hand, and vice versa. The hand is the ability of the thing, which means that the object and the hand are inseparable. The polychromatic object and the hand, and in a sense, the hand is also polychromatic, and so is the polyrhythmic field and the feet, and the labyrinth and the spiral. They all belong to the same space. The labyrinth is one of the most miraculous inventions ever conceived. One would almost... On the right, you see this labyrinth, and on the left also another drawing of the labyrinth. The labyrinth is one of the most miraculous inventions ever conceived. One would almost say that it is the primordial figure, the turn itself. The labyrinth abolishes all opposition between movement and stoppage purely through the figure of turning itself. The many spiral dances end with a young girl in the center being buried alive. All this indicates there are strong arguments for fundamental relationships between labyrinths, caves, and the depths of the earth, which means the foot space. You never get to see what is below the foot space, actually. So in that sense, it is already part of the depths of the earth. And the coloring, especially in this, these figures which you see at the bottom, these images of the foot or the feet, and it's all now ornamented at the very ankle joint over there. And the various stances which it does in terms of its rhythmic movements, in terms of when it spirals. So that's one. And the red colored souls actually are also part of the transfiguration. That's the extremes, and how actually the figure is constructed. The figure of Shalabhanji or this extreme form of contrapposto is constructed between these two extremities of the hand space, which is almost beginning from the wrist and to the points. The hand is also the part with the act of pointing, the index finger liberated itself from the opposable thumb. It logically follows that after pointing after being able to point at things, referring to them. Then later on, sound also gets added to it, which means the foot space is added to the gestural space, the hand space, and then you have the spoken word, or the word which also has images in it. In that sense, word is also a chiastic structure. Language itself is a chiastic structure. Here you see the transfiguration of the tips of the hand, which are involved in the gestural movements. Of course, apart from grasping things, it is actually hand makes things appear, and it is part of the appearance. So the hand is part of the gestural space also, while the leg is part of the feet is part of the rhythmic movements. In that sense, they belong to a different thing, different spaces, and the figure actually tries to mediate the two, and in that process, it gets turned and gets twisted. And yeah, well, we can go at the center itself, highly if possible, and just to have a look at these figures. Yeah.
Is this all part of one temple?
Yeah, these are all part of one temple.
But it's the same figure or not?
Same figure basically. Shalabhanji. Shalabhanji can mean actually wood, basically, because earlier all images or sculptures were done in wood, basically. But that is all lost now because wood would not survive. But the tradition is actually it goes far back in terms of making things in wood.
Say, are there names for these foot and hand positions or postures?
Yes.
They seem to be almost like small bodies in themselves.
Yeah. There are.
Names are they? What kind of names?
Those are basically called, when concerned to the foot movements, they are called chari movements, how the foot moves and how it turns and how things happen over there. And while concerning to hands, they are all gestural movements per se, and basically
they don't have animal names or something like in yoga.
No, they have. They also have animal names. They also have animal names like a hand becoming a lotus, or
that's a flower.
Yeah, that's a flower, or hand becoming something else, or hand. So you will always find some things going on in their hands, while something is holding something, or a mirror, or this or that. It's almost like a hand and things, because they are inseparable. They are always interchangeable. Also, they are always doing something. And also, in the process of ornamentation, it is the hand that is actually ornamenting things. So before the eye comes, the hand is always present in that thing. And even the foot space is ornamented by the hand. So there is always this loop, because in order to paint the soul, the hand is involved in the painting of the soul of the feet. So
this is a very powerful demonstration. I mean, it's chiastic, obviously, because the feet are going somewhere downward and the hands are going sideways, almost like flowering into appearance. And then the rest of the body needs to snake and turn to get these two together. And it's very interesting how you show these sort of the three layers, because there's the whole body trying to sort of find an in-between posture almost. The hands almost have their separate postures, like little creatures. And the feet, of course, we can't hear the bells, but that must be very rhythmic, very different than what the hands are doing.
In the hand, you have this bangles. There is an image on the top over there.
The bracelets. I saw
bracelets. The bracelets.
But
which
really
are.
No, I think what's so interesting here is that with your previous presentation, we saw like this body becoming radiant because of all those limbs in all these different positions. And here we actually see that there's incredible tension between two layers. to actually create that movement. It's not just like a flapping about or something, or like a very, because some of these look neutral and almost like spherical or radial in that sense. When you go to the left, you actually see that these two poles being so extreme in their expressions, and then the hip and the shoulders trying to sort of manage.
In fact, the hip is actually the gap where because of which the figure can turn.
Well, yeah, it's almost like the reverse of a Western image, where the hip is always the center. I mean, it's the center of gravity, obviously. And here it's almost like the extremities sort of take over, and it's the hip that needs to manage. It's not like the hip is choreographing the feet and hands. It's almost the reverse.
The reverse of it.
The reverse power relationship. It's very, very interesting. It's incredible to see how much ornament there is at these very specific spots of movement. Yeah, and we see a lot of these themes return. It's like the standing and the appearing, or ergon parergon, but also like the ornament and the movement, how they're related, and how things slip into appearance. It's a very powerful. I mean, it's so extreme. You can hardly call it contrapposto anymore. Yeah, and it's an incredible variety of postures. We can just go to the middle again. I understand there's 108 of them.
No, that is what maybe more. I don't know, but 108 are all which are found on listed maybe.
Yeah, because that number sort of haunts me, because it's 9 times 12, so it's a grid of postures. And just if I see a grid, I'm always thinking a matrix with variables. So the rows and columns must be able to organize those postures. I'm very interested. And because we just see like a few of those, and they all have their own names. And what I understand from Indian dance in that sense, in this very ancient form of dance, that they're like postures, and then they're transitions to other postures. So it's not like a flow of movement. It's much more a set of instances with very precise postures, and that the hands are then sort of, moving from one to the other. Of course, it's easier for the hands to keep on moving. I'd love to see that. It's almost like as a movie. So the dances, would they always contain a certain number of those 108, or?
It depends on what you are actually, because it's part of the drama. Drama, dance, and music, they are part of it, because there's a story is being told through the body.
Right.
So,
wow. Yeah. I'm also like flabbergasted by the fact that the nude and the ornament are so directly visible. So what we know from Greek cultures, we either get the nude or the ornament, but never together in that sense. We get drapery, of course, but never in the sort of depiction of jewelry. And I think that's really something to think about, that you get sort of both at the same time. It's not like, this truth and covering. We always get this notion of covering, and that there's something hidden, this idea of truth or the latent and the manifest or whatever. And here they're both present, right? You get the nude and the ornament at the same time. And it's clearly that there's not a simple form of stance. Right, it's not like your simple vertical line. Very strong. Okay, thank you, Jusai. We go to the last one, which is Jiao's crane dance. Are you there, Jiao? Oh, I don't see Jiao anymore. I can just say, like, I'm not sure what happened to Jiao. Can we just zoom out, Hairi? Hairi, Jesus,
I'm
can we
driving.
zoom out? Huh?
Hey, sorry, I
driving.
hit the wrong button.
No.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm back. I hit the wrong button. Can I share my screen?
yeah, very important,
Okay.
right button. Yeah. Okay, crane dance.
Um, so everyone can see my screen, right?
Yeah.
So I started from my research from the Stiltmen. So the crane, how does crane connected with the stilt dancing or the Stiltmen? So Stiltmen is a folk dance was seen in most part of China, but also seen in the Spain. This is the video showing the this is the stilt dancing in the Castile part of the Spain.
Can we zoom in there? Uh-oh.
So first of all, the men, all the dancers are men, and they are wearing women's clothes. So this has a ritual meaning, showing that the perfect being is both has the feminine and the male perspective, and also the choreography is the Morris dance. In the Chinese culture, the Stiltmen has combining with the drama with costume. It's performed during the Spring Festival and during the Lantern Festival. And also combining with a lot of folk element of the local culture. And also the choreography is combined with the folk dances of the folk dances and with all their accessories. Still, so this is the Stiltman as a stunt or a dancing dating back to the Wei Dynasty, where you can see people are wearing these stilts and they are doing the performance. So why do they dance with the stilt? This has to do with people's worship to crane as a totem. Crane as the immortal bird or immortal animals can be dated by the antiquity. This is an illustration of the from the book called The Classics of Mountains and Seas, which has existed as early as the 4th century BC. The book actually recorded the geographical and all kinds of fantasy animals, where there is the people who has these long legs, and also the powerful this beast has the face of a person, but the body of the bird, but also the feet is like a human's hand, and also this beast has the wings of a bird. This is the mural paintings of the Gaogoli regime, which is northern part of China and today's Korean peninsula. The immortal person, how to become immortal? So you need to ride on the crane to become on the road to the immortal world. So Korean, in the Taoist belief, in the Taoist culture, Korean is the steed of the immortal. So this is the painting showing that the four immortals in the Buddhist and Taoist culture, looking at the longevity star god riding on the crane to the immortal world. Crane dance itself is also related to the funeral ritual. This is a very interesting story. So basically, it's the king of Wu. His daughter killed herself because his father gave her the leftover fish. So to has the as a memorial for his daughter, he dug up to make a pond, earth piled up to make a hill, and to use the stone to make the coffin. And he buried with all the treasures, and then had the white cranes dance in the marketplace and ask the common people to follow. He then asked the men and the women together with the crane enter the gate of the tomb and activated a mechanical device to close them all in. So this is from a very a text of the antique text, Annals of Wu and Yue. So crane and also the crane dance in the Chinese culture, not only the crane as a symbol of longevity and immortality, but also crane dances is evolved in the funeral ritual. Crane dance in the ancient Greek culture is also related to the labourers. So this is from the thesis. It is said that after his return from the so at the gallows, he and his the men and the girls and the boys, so they have this dance. It's called a crane dance, geratos. It is imitating of the windlings and the twistings of the labourers. What is the dance looks like? So this is called the Francois was. So men and the women, so the alternating, they hold their hands together. It is in a line. Also, there is a leader at each end of the line. The dance dramatizes entrance into death and then a return to life. It is imitating Caesar's entrance into and return from the labourers. Also, they hold a rope in their hand. The rope is also believed to be a symbol of the serpent. So, on one hand, if it dance to this is counter sunwise, it's towards the death, towards the and also it moves back forward. So also it dramatizes people's freedom from labourers, their freedom from the state, their freedom from the enclosure. It's kind of winning or victory. The serpent is also a symbol of the eternal renewal of life because it renews its skin annually. The labourers also, what does the labourers looks like? There is no image of labourers until the 16th century. So people can only, this is a kind of imagined pattern, not the actual architecture itself. So this is a drinking bowl dating back to the 15th century. It shows the Theseus and the Minotaur, the beast, next to a portal decorated with a meander pattern. So this is the 16th century architect Sebastiano Celio. So he designed he designed the libraries for the I think the French garden. So the libraries he designed, it shows a meandering pattern. Actually, the meandering pattern is I couldn't find it. Okay, here. So the meandering pattern is a very old pattern. It is a Paleolithic era. It is I will quote a text from the Claudia to show how the meandering pattern, the connection between the meandering and the deliveries. Here we see armed bands advancing and retiring in mixed movement. The word is recursors is again can be dated back to the thesis. Executed according to a fixed plan. The components separate, wielding and counter-wielding with ordered skill, following a course more tortuous than the corridors of the Minotaur's Cretan palace, or the reaches of meanderings wandering stream. So there is an analogy between the libraries of the Cretan palace with the meander. The river is the wandering stream of the meander. So what is the we see the meandering pattern which can in ancient Greek art it is associated with the meander river. There is a confusion of that and the beginning in the flow of the meander. Not only resembles the back and forth of the libraries' sinuosities, but also the alternating swings of the crane dance between left and right, death and life. At the very end, I will quote from Plato. So Plato is giving the metaphor of people's thinking like libraries. So Plato said, it seems like falling into a libraries. We thought we were at the finish, but our way bent round, and we found ourselves at it were back at the beginning, and just as far from that which we were seeking at first. So we can think of the meandering or the libraries or the crane dance as metaphysically as as an alternation between being and non-being. So as from the beginning to end, from like your cause and effect, from your desire to fruition, there is never ending, but it is never the same. And but I want to come back to the Chinese crane dance. So in the Chinese crane dance, the crane is not only the immortality word. We can understand as the immortality, transcendenting, transcendental word. So in especially in the Taoist culture, you are never existing, but you are never dying. There's your being is cannot be departed or separated from life and death. And also in the crane dance, in the story, the crane dance is as a company or as a metaphor for this non-being. So I see the crane dance or the crane
Can we
animal
see a
as a
crane dance?
symbol.
Do you have a video of a crane dance by actual cranes?
Yeah.
You can zoom in. We can't see it. So are they dancing all together, or are they dancing in pairs, or are they dancing alone? What are they doing?
So they were moving at the same time.
So they're moving in pairs. Is it a mating dance? Hello? No, we don't need the music.
So I also read that there's a French poet making the connection between the labyrinth with the crane flying in the sky and it's changing the pattern of their flight.
Okay, what I've read is like this. It said so the crane dance is often also called a snake dance. So and why is that? Because the crane makes convoluted patterns on the ground together, right? So it's both the cranes that are like vertical, and it's the pattern on the ground that is snake-like, right? That's how the two are combined. Of course, that's the big question. If you see the crane dance with the stilts on those high legs, and then you suddenly see like the labyrinth and the rope. It's like, how is that connected? Well, the idea is that there's actually the serpent pattern is on the ground, right? So just to say to everybody, it's like the labyrinth is not a building at all. It's quite well known that's actually a dance pattern. It was already described 1500 BC in Minoan culture as a dance. And that dance is actually repeated by Theseus with several people. You see that men and women and connected by a rope. So we get lots of that, this spiraling in and spiraling out via a rope is a sort of transfiguration model, right? So it's, I mean, you can call it a symbol, but I just find the notion of a symbol very weak because it's a mental construct, of course, and the only thing you have to do then is believe in the symbol that you can become immortal. And what I think is interesting about these that are actually dances and rituals that are repeated over time. So you have a village, and you clear it in the middle, and you have this dance. And that's all over the world, either in China or in France or in ancient Greece. And these need to be repeated. So it's really that the figure needs to be enacted, right? So it's not, I think that's the weakness about it, thinking of a symbol that is purely a mental construct. And it's quite clear that a figure needs to be enacted, right? You need a stage, you need an audience. It sounds like the seminar itself, but the figure actually has to be established, right? And there's lots of there's actually quite extreme forms of spiraling dances where there's a figure is actually, or a person or a young female actually is sacrificed in the middle. I know that from old sort of Mesoamerican cultures that there's actually death and sacrifice involved. Right, so it's really a notion of transfiguration, right? So I think it's more powerful than a symbol in that sense, if you understand it as a figure. Also, this whole transformation of a male and female and the wearing of costumes, it's highly ceremonial. It's almost like a shamanistic dance. Of course, we know from shamans, that they do spiraling dances and have transfigurations, wear headgear and all this. I think it's very interesting to see how the crane dance sort of is a figure that is distributed all over the world. It's quite a stunning idea, and that you still have it like in these different cultures in very different forms. Okay, I think we're far over time. I want to thank everybody. Next time we'll be, of course, I'll be lecturing again. We'll also have the spring break in between, so it will take a while before we see each other again. Of course, not the actors. I will see those next week. I just want to thank everybody. If there's any questions at the end, maybe you're not too tired. So you see, there's many aspects now, and I think what's quite fantastic, and that's really thanks to the actors coming from different cultures, is that we're sort of moving out of the Greek idiom, and we're seeing very powerful images from Middle America and India and China now, sort of, and actually having a far more developed sense of figuration often. I think it's a very interesting that we see these figures sort of travel through different cultures and can learn an immense amount here. I think for the idea that the figures actually form a world map is a quite interesting, very beautiful thing to see. So I want to thank everybody